Hello, I'm Chris Schnee, storyteller. Today's tale is disturbing because it's not fiction, or rather, it's about liars presenting fiction as truth. Exhibit 1, X versus Media Matters. Our first topic starts on the night of November 17, 2023 with Elon Musk. And by the way, congratulations to SpaceX on their Starship rocket test on the 18th. Musk threatened a thermonuclear lawsuit against Media Matters, a media watchdog group. Their focus is on obsessively watching conservative media, hoping to find something objectionable in it and use that to threaten the advertising money. The late Rush Limbaugh was a favorite target for them, which forced them to be devoted listeners. The lawsuit actually got filed on Monday, November 20. What's going on in this post? Apparently, Media Matters has been behind a push to destroy Twitter, or X, I'll say Twitter. They want to destroy it financially through getting advertisers to pull their ads. The tactic is similar to what they did against other outlets, but Twitter is a social media site with countless random yahoos like me. There is no single editorial voice. Letting all the yahoos talk means that there's something there to offend everyone. In fact, that's apparently how the algorithm works, trying to present you with content that will make you read and engage, even if it does that by making you angry. It certainly worked for Media Matters. It says here that they, 1, made a new account for this plan, 2, manipulated its content, its following and likes and so on, to generate advertising or suggested posts that would be offensive in some way. 3, reloaded their web browser again and again until they got something offensive to appear and saved screenshots. 4, showed advertisers those pictures, falsely claiming they were typical Twitter content. "We're outraged," said Media Matters, "and you should be too." Musk says that he's got detailed data showing how contrived and rare Media Matters staged info is. You can do that kind of thing when you got a social media company. He can prove that literally nobody saw some of these disreputable posts next to those ads except Media Matters itself. Here, I'll show the first page of the lawsuit, summarizing the same. What's happened then is that a media company is lying to present a false impression of Twitter with the goal of hurting it financially. And why do that? To either shut it down or force it into line with all the other companies that heavily censor and manipulate news and discussion. Here's something important to notice about the fight. Media Matters started with the tiniest seed of fact that if you manipulate Twitter just right, you can force it to do something embarrassing. You can do the same to most people, too. They then falsely presented that as typical behavior of the site to manipulate people who wouldn't research it. The facts got filtered into being a lie. Now let's look at a related spat that illustrates this point better. Exhibit 2, Musk versus Anti-Semitism. Watch this process of filtering a drop of truth into a bucket of lies. It's typical internet drama. On November 15, 2023, a guy named Charles Weber posted a video. He describes himself as a Jewish conservative from South Florida. That's his bio. The video depicts an angry father shaming his son for posting racist filth on the internet, such as, quote, "Hitler was right." The good father says that if you have opinions like that, you should be willing to say them to people's faces. Then came a guy calling himself the artist formerly known as Eric. His bio calls him a father, husband, cybersecurity, server engineer, and so on. He said, as though saying it to people's faces rather than on Twitter, well, I'll let you read the exact words. Here's the page, and here's the full reply. Might want to pause and read. I interpret this as him saying, Jewish groups are endorsing ideas that we would call racist if they were turned around and aimed at themselves, and they support flooding the country with immigrants who then don't share our values of tolerance and do rallies in support of Hamas. Whether or not that's true, it's not a particularly racist thing to say. Not if it's okay to say, for instance, that there are Hispanic advocacy groups with names like The Race, La Raza, with policies that arguably are also harmful to America. And Musk replied to that remark, "You have said the actual truth." He also separately posted this other message here on the 15th, criticizing the Jewish group called the Anti-Defamation League, ADL. He doesn't like the organization's policies and goals. You can read the exact wording. So Musk agreed with some guy on Twitter saying there's a racial advocacy group pushing policies that are rebounding harmfully against both that group and America. That's it. That's the basis of this drama. How did that get reported on, though? Here, for instance, is an article by Axios on November 16, a day after this. Axios says, accurately, that Musk said, "You have said the actual truth," in response to a post criticizing the policies of Jewish advocacy groups. Okay, that's accurate so far. The article then calls corporations cowards for not instantly denouncing Musk. It then uses that turn of phrase, "he said," without evidence. The first time I ever noticed reporters doing that was around 2016, and it's only ever in response to conservatives. What's the problem besides throwing some editorial content into a fact article? Well, here's what Axios then reported the very next day. Elon Musk backed an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. This is tied in explicitly with Media Matters discovering all that terrible racism on Twitter. Notice that although there's a link to the previous article, the text states as fact that Musk backs evil racist talk. And then, on November 21, they reported about the Media Matters lawsuit. In this article, it repeats as fact that Elon's been saying mean racist stuff. Then it adds he's now defending himself and insisting, no, he's not an anti-Semite. Here's another media source harping on the same idea, from the 16th, I think. I'm including it partly because of the level of journalistic incest on display. It's NBC plus Microsoft plus Fox News collaborating on this one. Great job. Media Matters went one step farther, adding the idea that Musk was talking about replacement migration, which is the replacement of white people through mass immigration. And my God, it's the same theory that they say motivated a mass shooting. Musk didn't actually say that, but it makes him sound bad, so they throw that into the article anyway. And we wouldn't ever want to tolerate a belief system that leads people to go on murderous shooting sprees, now would we? See how this process works? The man says something reasonable, it gets reported on in a hostile but basically true way, and then it gets laundered in future reporting so that what the man actually said is inaccurately summarized as mean racist stuff. Then the reporting states as established fact that the man said mean racist stuff, leaving out the original facts. Same basic concept with money laundering, where you do some honest business to disguise where you're getting illegal money. Axios can even honestly claim that if a reader bothers to drill down to the past articles, he can find the original. But how many readers will actually do that, and how many will just trust the summary? Here's something kind of funny. In the last few days, someone dug through years-old internet comments by the Media Matters president and found some interesting things. I'll just smile and say they're mean, bigoted remarks and leave them to your imagination. And by the way, yes, ADL does explicitly endorse illegal immigration. ADL also for a while tried to redefine the word racism so that hatred and violence against white people can never be called racist. And the United Nations has explicitly proposed something called replacement migration to replace the aging populations of many nations, mostly the white ones. So while the media cry conspiracy theory and racism, methinks the lobby doth protest too much. Exhibit 3. Twitter before the day of Musk. During the 2020 election, pre-Musk Twitter actively conspired with other media agencies. They suppressed public knowledge of a laptop of damning information about the Biden family. The significance of that information isn't relevant right now. The fact is that it looked bad for a presidential candidate, and Twitter management decided to ban Americans from talking about it. So did Facebook, and one-directional media like CNN decided in near unison not to report on it except to lie that it was debunked. How was it debunked exactly? A group of intelligence officials, i.e. spies, published a letter declaring that the laptop was in some sense fake. In what sense, though? Does the laptop not exist at all? Or are the laptops something put there by evil Russian hackers? Or maybe the contents are real, but they're being taken badly out of context? The letter didn't say which one it was. Instead, it said that the data, quote, has all the classic earmarks of a Russian disinformation operation. If we are right, this is Russia trying to influence how Americans vote in this election, and we believe strongly that Americans need to be aware of this. End quote. So, something about this is Russian disinformation. Some part. Somehow. There was no evidence presented that it actually was, and note that the reporters talking about this didn't add that without evidence phrasing. But the laptop was the kind of thing those dastardly Russians would do. Ironically, while looking for this illustration of this dastardly duo, I saw a link to Daily Kos using it to illustrate the idea that Trump might be a foreign agent. So this bit of storytelling was on their minds, too. Now, remember what happened because of that letter. We went from a group of spies vaguely saying that Russians were up to dirty tricks, to U.S. media declaring that the laptop had been debunked as fake, to the same media outright suppressing further discussion. A vague initial claim got expanded into whatever it needed to be to get the job of censorship done. However, Newsweek in 2022 backpedaled a little bit. They said, well, they never outright said it was fake. Even so, as Newsweek notes, the laptop came up in the presidential debates, and Joe Biden explicitly used the evidence-free debunking to protect himself and steer the narrative away from his family's criminal activity. And that was all the average voter heard. That there was some talk of a damning laptop, but it had been exposed as a Russian fake, and no further discussion was allowed. Your betters had decided this for you. According to at least one poll, that lie by itself might have been enough to sway the election. By the way, this magnified lying is the same kind of thing that happened with certain drugs during 2020. We were told that they were horse dewormer for livestock use, which is not 100% a lie. except that the World Health Organization notes them as being essential medicines for human use as well. So media took the fact that the stuff is sometimes given to horses and smudged that into a statement that is never for people. Same technique. Start with a little bit of truth and then magnify it into something that's not the truth and present that to people. Why didn't I name the medicines in the previous paragraph? Because for all I know, they'll get me secretly shadow banned on YouTube. I don't know what hidden rules there currently are for what words and topics you may discuss. Anyway, we also found out the spy letter about the laptop was something coordinated with the Obama White House. They got a talking points email before that letter was published to help them use it to manipulate the narrative. We have testimony that was done specifically to help Biden win the election. Another point worth mentioning here is that the number one signature on that letter is James Clapper, former National Security Director. That man is a known perjurer. He lied under oath to Congress to protect illegal NSA spy operations against Americans, exposed by Edward Snowden and probably still in place. U.S. media never questioned the word of a known felon liar when he said that Biden is clean. Exhibit 4. The Charlottesville Blood Libel. There was a wave of angry iconoclasts beginning to tear down statues of anyone associated with the Confederate side in the Civil War, or sometimes of a Union abolitionist, or in one case a statue of an elk. Sometimes the removal was done through peaceful legal means, and sometimes by vigilantes. The magazine Popular Mechanics even ran an article giving specific, detailed advice on how to illegally destroy statues in the name of fighting racism. Though they edited a bit out, the original version of this article fantasized about hearing the screams of a white racist as you burn him alive. It was, let's say, an emotionally charged situation. Protest groups for and against statue removal met in Charlottesville, Virginia, home of Thomas Jefferson's University of Virginia. Violence broke out. I won't get into the details of that part, except to note that if you go by the official story, it was definitely unprovoked, one-sided violence. What I want to talk about is the speech that Trump then gave at Charlottesville. He said that there were two groups of angry people there for the protest, passionate about the statues. He said that there was violence by both of them. He said that there were also good, decent people present on both sides. He explicitly said, quote, "And I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists because they should be condemned totally." As I noted before, the media overtly and maliciously lied about what he said. They presented the phrase "very fine people" right next to images of neo-Nazis and stating that he was soft on white supremacists. This is one of the many media outlets that acted in direct evil to lie to you. The best thing I can propose in their defense is that some of them may have fooled themselves, setting up a narrative such that they automatically believe Trump's a racist and therefore any further story about him being racist must be true, no research needed. We later saw the same thing happen in the presidential debates, in which he was asked for the umpteenth time to condemn racists, and he testily used the wrong prepositional phrase. He told a group called the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by instead of stand down. Aha, he didn't say stand down, so he was giving secret evil racist orders to them to prepare for revolution, in a televised debate no less. No, really, how stupid or dishonest do you have to be to accept that as the explanation? If there's one thing I think we can all agree on about Trump is that he's not great at choosing his words carefully. But believing the worst about him gets easier by the snowball effect. If you already think you know the man's a dangerous racist, you can accept the official story again and again about every new thing he says. This is another example of the media pouncing on the slightest crumb of fact and then turning it into a massive lie and shoving it at you. I've even heard of a recent dystopian sci-fi story, I can't recall the title, in which there's a racist group called the Noble Men, i.e. Proud Boys, singing about how they are standing back and standing by. So people are still harping on that particular quote. Why do I call the Charlottesville quote the blood lie? Because it harkens back to Europe in the year 1475. Some of you know the story all too well. A rumor got around that a Christian boy had been kidnapped by Jews. Then that Jews had done it to drink his blood in a secret evil ritual. The rumor caught on and got so much attention that Jewish people started getting arrested and tortured until they confessed to their part in the scheme. Aha, we have a confession, so it must be true. We knew it all along. The same sort of hateful hysteria is happening now, and it leads down the same dark road. I should note that this kind of propaganda isn't even always used for evil ends. We have one celebrated example of it in American history. See this famous picture of the Boston Massacre? It didn't actually happen this way, and we know it. It's blatantly wrong in several respects, and the very phrase Boston Massacre was carefully chosen to incite outrage. Sam Adams and Paul Revere were heroes, but on this topic, they were lying propagandists. Puppeteers manipulating people's outrage can lead to violent revolution. Exhibit 5. The Lies of January 6, 2021. We have a public record now of messages sent by President Trump on January 6th. The man got little sleep, posting all that night. He wrote very early that Vice President Pence should send the electoral votes back to the individual states. He was calling on Pence to exercise a power to question the electoral votes being handed to him for ritual counting. Did Pence really have that authority, or was his function purely ceremonial? There's some dispute about that. It gets into your reading of Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution, and Amendment 12, and the Electoral Count Act of 1887, which is itself controversial. I have imagined that if the VP has a purely ceremonial counting function, you could sneak a Waffle House placemat into the stack of electoral vote envelopes with the phrase 1 billion EVs for Trump scrawled on it, and he would have to accept that as legitimate. Which interpretation of these procedural laws as of 2021 is correct? I don't really know, and there's been yet another law enacted since then. To add another wrinkle, there really is an explicit procedure laid out in the Constitution by which, if there's said to be no majority, the House delegations of each state vote as blocks. Texas gets one vote, Rhode Island one, and so on. So both Trump's send it back to the states theory and a rival theory of declaring no majority and holding a vote by state are plausible legal theories. They're calls for using procedures arguably laid out in our legal system for handling a disputed election. Do you know what these claims aren't? They are not a call for insurrection. They are not an attempt to overthrow the government, not an attempt to ignore the legal system, but an attempt to petition the government for redress of grievances by having it properly follow its own established rules. You can sincerely believe that the claims of fraud are baseless, while accepting that the Trump team was trying to work within the system to call foul. So if you read Trump's call for a send the votes back procedure as inciting insurrection, you're flat out wrong. Did he say anything else to the effect of, it's time to overthrow the government and install me as dictator? Bwahaha! No. Did he even say, ignore the vote and declare me the winner? No, he didn't do that either. What did he say after the call for Pence to act? He said, the states want to redo their votes. Then he gave a speech in person saying that the election was rigged. He rambled for an hour or so, speaking angrily and declaring fraud. He described a redo or state-level confirmation of some states' elections as a means of following the Constitution. He described a Biden presidency as illegitimate, in the same terms used by Hillary Clinton to describe Trump. She had called the 2016 election a fraud over and over. Trump wrapped up by talking about illegal immigration. And then at the end he said, and here's a long uncut quote, "We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. Our exciting adventures and boldest endeavors have not yet begun. My fellow Americans, for our movement, for our children, and for our beloved country, and I say this despite all that's happened, the best is yet to come. So we're going to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I love Pennsylvania Avenue. And we're going to the Capitol, and we're going to try and give... The Democrats are hopeless. They never voted for anything, not even one vote. But we're going to try and give our Republican, the weak ones, because the strong ones don't need any of our help, we're going to try and give them the kind of pride and boldness that they need to take back our country. So let's walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I want to thank you all. God bless you, and may God bless America. Thank you all for being here." He applauded as the music played and American flags waved. The crowd responded by dancing to the song YMCA by the Village People. This is what Democrats consider smoking gun evidence of an attempt to start a murderous revolution to overthrow the government. Telling people to walk down a lovely street to the Capitol building rather than inside it, to encourage weak-willed politicians to act, while rambling about future exciting adventures and what Democrats won't vote for. And a bit earlier, by the way, saying peacefully and patriotically. And then people danced to Village People music. This is not normally how people react when they just heard a speech telling them to do some shooting and killing right now. "Aha!" cried the Democrats. "He used the phrase, fight like hell. That must be a call for shooting and killing, because it was in the long speech there somewhere, and nobody ever uses that phrase in any other context than in a call for literal violence. After all, Trump was geared up for battle by wearing a suit and tie and armed with a microphone. He was less dressed for war than Ukraine's Comrade Zelensky in his favorite costume, but hey. Say that you are an insurrectionist trying to talk a crowd into a bloodthirsty frenzy to murder some politicians and overthrow the government for you. So you say, fight like hell. You also say peacefully and patriotically. And then you talk about how much you like the street, you thank everybody for showing up, and then you cue that classic slaughter anthem, YMCA. That isn't even the most militaristic Village People song. He could have said, "Come on, defend your motherland in the Navy." Come to think of it, the YMCA lyrics include the phrase, "You can do whatever you feel," and maybe that is a secret code meaning you should break into the Capitol. Aha! This is the Democratic Party theory of Trump's sinister plan to overthrow the government. Then Trump posted a video that said, "We had an election that was stolen from us," and I'm excerpting here, "but you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. This is a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace, so go home. We love you." That video got forcibly taken down, making it look like he reacted to the day's events with silence. Think about the timeline. The story that you've been fed goes like this. That evil President Trump said the election was a fraud. Then he gave a speech telling people to overthrow the government. Then an angry mob broke into the Capitol building, urged on by him, and he remained silent. But he was giving that speech until about 1:12 p.m. D.C. time. We have a lot of timestamp video of what was going on by then. As you can see, a crowd swarmed toward the building at about 12:56 p.m., becoming a large mass held back by cops by 1 p.m. The lower right shot shows part of a methodical push to tear gas the protesters and shove them away. Here are pictures from 1:13 and 1:18 p.m. before Trump or anyone else could take that walk down the lovely street. At that point, there was already a crowd outside the Capitol, already angry. Why were they angry? At 1:13, a cop was shouting the following, "We need more munitions. Let's go. Shoot them. Shoot. Shoot." And indeed, the cops shot into a civilian crowd. There is publicly available video of a man with a gory wound to his face, where the U.S. government slammed a rubber bullet into and through his cheek. I'm told this happened about 1:07 p.m. I haven't got a timestamp on this picture yet, but Officer Friendly here is seen repeatedly shooting grenades into the crowd. I'm not sure of the type, probably gas, but there's an explosion visible. Note the shooter wasn't aiming at the people who were most threatening, the ones shoving at the barriers. He was having himself a good old time shooting grenades into a crowd. How often is he going to get an excuse to shoot civilians, right? And here, timestamped 1:12, we see a guy with several grenades labeled Stinger, rubber ball. We get a decent look at the video because he keeps chucking them one after another in the general direction of an unarmed crowd of civilians who are outside the Capitol building. We also see what seem to be flashbangs, and people way back in the crowd recoil as bombs explode around them. So the violence was already happening while Trump was still talking or immediately after he finished, and before the village people had whipped them into a murderous frenzy. Here are two pairs of screenshots. The top row is from 1:17, apparently the same guy yelling to shoot the protesters. Here is repeatedly calling for blast munitions. The lower pair of pictures is from 2:19 p.m., with the cops noting that they sure are inflicting pain on innocent people. The camera-wearing cop reflects that he's only making the crowd even angrier. Nice rainbow flag in the crowd, by the way. Repeat, we have footage of U.S. government agents shooting grenades into a crowd of flag-waving protesters before they had threatened any politicians. What motivated them to then enter the building? I mean, other than the fact they'd been shot at for over an hour. If it wasn't being shot at, it might well have been federal agents egging them on. Here's a picture of a man named Ray Epps, who was on video shouting, quote, "We need to go into the Capitol! Into the Capitol!" The crowd found him suspicious as hell and started chanting, "Fed! Fed!" Mysteriously, the government decided it wasn't worth arresting him for anything at all. Until those pesky right-wingers kept asking why not, he was finally charged with one count of disorderly conduct in September 2023. It took them that long. His punishment is expected to be between 0 and 6 months in jail, plus $500 in fine. While he gets this belated wrist slap to end the criticism, other people have spent years in a hellhole jail in D.C. Was Epps really a planted spy encouraging people to riot harder? The FBI got asked under oath before Congress, and their official stance is, that's a secret. Were there any spies in the crowd? That's a secret. Can you assure us that there were at least no spies actively encouraging violence? That's a secret. So, while I don't condone the people who actually went into the building, it's quite possible the feds egged them on, besides having shot at them for over an hour. Tell me, between Trump in a suit uttering the words, "fight like hell," and the cops in riot gear with grenade launchers shouting, "Shoot them! Shoot! Shoot!" which of them would you say was inciting violence? They happened at about the same time. Did Trump tell anybody to literally hit anyone or to commit any illegal act? You can't say so, if you're being at all honest. If saying that an election was rigged counts as incitement, how about saying that the country will become a fascist dictatorship if one man isn't stopped? Because that's what we heard constantly for years. In fact, here's somebody's fantasy about what happened on January 6th and how a horrifying gun-toting revolution was barely stopped. Note, this image is about as accurate as the Boston Massacre picture. For an attempt to overthrow the government, the rioters sure were poorly armed. NPR says the crowd was a terrifying force armed with bear spray, a stun gun walking stick, baseball bats and flagpoles. That's right, the government was nearly overthrown with pointy sticks. There's a report of a few people charged with having guns somewhere in the area, but not with going into the building with one or firing one at any point. So the germ of truth here is there were dudes in the crowd with baseball bats, and that get edited into being, oh my devil, it was an armed revolt. The knowledge that people will hear that description and believe that armed means guns. And meanwhile, we've been told by the White House that you can't resist the government unless you have F-16s and nuclear weapons. But apparently pointy sticks are really scary. It's their one weakness. It's like Ewoks versus the Empire. Have you heard the name Ashley Babbitt? I wouldn't be surprised if you haven't. She was a protester who entered the Capitol with no ability to overthrow the government. She took a bullet from Michael Byrd, a Capitol police officer. He shot a female veteran who was no immediate threat to anyone. He later recalled that, quote, "That day I saved countless lives." Byrd was not only not put on trial, he was promoted. Remember, other cops who had someone die in their presence got immediately branded as murderers in the media, and they got put on trial for murder, no matter what the autopsy or witnesses said. But this man instead got a promotion. I can think of several reasons why that happened, and I don't like any of those explanations. Why not have him face a jury to decide if he did something wrong? The fact that he's immune to prosecution is so awful, it makes me question certain past narratives about evil Democrat vigilantes. That's also a bad road to go down. I don't want to do that. Anyway, she barely gets mentioned because she doesn't fit the narrative. By the way, you also got lied to about how many cops died. 0 on the scene, 1 ruled to have died of natural causes the next day, and 4 suicides. That is, the rioters killed nobody. You were also lied to about a guy supposedly beaten in the head with a fire extinguisher. We were told throughout 2020 that all cops are bastards, but for one shining moment, these particular police were heroes. Not coincidentally, it was also the moment when they were protecting multimillionaire politicians against angry peasants. None of this segment here even reflects on the truth or falsehood of any fraud claims. I'm not talking about that today, it's its own topic. I instead pointed out that you were fed a story about the President of the United States trying to overthrow the government and directly causing a heavily armed mob to assemble and kill their way into the building. You've been lied to, but that lie is now the standard repeated storyline. Those of us who don't believe it now have 0 trust left in the people pushing it. Exhibit 6. Jacob Blake and Kyle Rittenhouse. I want to bring up one more example of my main point. In 2020, there was a man named Jacob Blake. The police got a 911 call from his girlfriend who'd thrown him out, and she was saying he showed up without permission and stole her keys. The cops looked him up and saw he had an active felony warrant for sexual assault and domestic abuse. So they showed up knowing this guy was a wanted, violent criminal. Blake resisted arrest. They fought. He had a knife. He reached into a car and turned toward the cops with a knife in his hands. A cop shot him. But we were told that he was a poor innocent victim of racist cops. Why? Because he's black. We already had the narrative out there that cops are horrible racists who shoot black people for no reason. There was a grain of truth to the story in that, yes, white cops shot a black man. For some people, that was all they needed to know. The fact that we'd had multiple cycles of cases like this getting lied about didn't make people question the first headlines. I will briefly remind people of the Zimmerman-Martin case, in which the media pushed a fake story and even doctored a 911 transcript. Maybe the most memorable of these cases was the one where a man passed out drunk in a Wendy's drive-thru, then stole a cop's taser and apparently tried to use it, and even that one got described as racist cop violence. Rioters then burned the Wendy's, by the way. Or how about that time a man stole from a convenience store clerk, shoved him around, got confronted by cops, charged at them, and got shot. Again, we got told he was totally innocent. The meme, "hands up, don't shoot," got chanted endlessly. As this article here shows, some people found that they'd been getting the basic facts wrong, but they continued to believe the storyline of racist cop violence anyway. In response to the Jacob Blake shooting, the one with the knife, people rioted. Police stood back and watched as angry people set buildings on fire. However, there were some vigilantes standing guard at a car shop. One was a 17-year-old named Kyle Rittenhouse. Rioters didn't wisely avoid his group. A convicted child molester tried to grab Rittenhouse's gun. The youngster shot him, then fled for his life. Chased down the street, Rittenhouse fell down. He got beaten in the head by a convicted violent felon with a skateboard, and then sat up and shot that guy and another man who was pointing an illegal pistol at him. Word got around that the 3 men who were shot were black, which they weren't, and that Rittenhouse was a cold-blooded racist out to kill black people, despite being with an organized militia to defend property from a violent mob. So this is an example of 2 false narratives in one. We'd had it hammered into our heads that evil white people are attacking blacks in large numbers, despite what the statistics show. Again and again, we got lied to about each new incident that remotely looked like it fit that storyline. The fake version of each story became common knowledge, making it easier to believe the next one every time. As a result of this kind of thing, we had widespread riots. Now our society is being taken over by explicitly anti-white racists who see America as fundamentally evil. Lies have consequences. Conclusion. Our culture is built around stories, symbols, and traditions. I've given several examples of how there's an ongoing effort to turn raw facts into false narratives that become effectively the official history. Did you hear that Elon was spouting anti-Semitic conspiracy theories by putting bigoted ads up on Twitter? It's a malicious lie, but if you write a news story and then a summary of that story and another summary, your preferred variation on the truth becomes what people take for granted in judging future events. The same thing happened again and again throughout 2020 and before. Nor is this flavor of snake-tongue reporting even just about race or elections. Briefly, I will also mention the adventures of J.K. Rowling, who had people go from loving to hating her because she doesn't support 100% of the new gender religion. At one point she said, people can disagree about the transgender stuff, but you shouldn't fire them from their jobs for disagreeing. If you so much as say that remark sounds reasonable, you risk being accused of posting transphobic remarks. See how the original deed gets filtered into being, that guy said unspecified multiple hateful things? Same deal as all the other examples. The goal is for you to be afraid and obedient, never expressing heresy against the new faith, because your betters have decided what the version of the truth is, and you can't question it. I went on at greater length about the lies surrounding January 6. I imagine someone hearing this and saying, I know what I saw. I saw violent rioters trying to kill politicians because Trump told them to overthrow the government. But no, you didn't see that. You saw some crime, yes, but you got lied to about exactly what happened and how and why and when. You've had power-hungry people try to shape the way you think so that they can control you more effectively. Growing lies have consequences. One example recently is that a judge in Colorado declared as fact that Trump was guilty of inciting insurrection, even though, under our former Constitution, everyone is innocent in the eyes of the law until proven guilty. Her wording explains that, quote, while Trump's ellipse speech did mention peaceful conduct in his command to march to the Capitol, the overall tenor was that to save the democracy and the country, the attendees needed to fight. So she admitted that he explicitly said peaceful, but decided on her own behalf that the tenor of the speech was violent. In this case, the judge decided that in the end it didn't matter enough to have him forcibly taken off the 2024 ballot, so we dodged a grenade there. But Trump is rich and influential. Do you think that you, commoner, are immune to this kind of legal logic being applied against you? Imagine, you are arrested and hauled into court. You stand accused of encouraging someone else to commit violence. You prove beyond a doubt that you explicitly told that person to be peaceful. But the judge says, the tenor of your speech felt violent to me. If a jury can be found to accept that kind of argument from feelings, and I'm sure one can, you're not safe from malicious prosecution. This situation of lynching by law is nothing new. It was a big part of the French Revolution, for example. And as said by Beria, one of Stalin's spies and torturers, show me the man and I will find the crime. That's where we might be headed. These storylines even rebound painfully to harm the very people that they're meant to help, supposedly. This picture here is an excerpt from something the Smithsonian, i.e. an arm of the U.S. government, put out to discuss white culture. According to this, white people own the concepts of marrying the mother of your children, being responsible, understanding cause and effect, property rights, and work before play. A lot of successful non-white people would disagree with this list being white-specific, and an actual white supremacist would agree with it. We have a social movement now that aims to overthrow white culture and explains that white culture is this list. When people decide to define themselves by contrast to the list, is that going to help them improve their lives? No. I think it will lead to a culture of endless failure, where people lack the education to understand why they're failing or what they might change. I've been watching lies snowball through the actions of rich, coordinated corporations and a bunch of media types who hate their own civilization. The level of deceit has gotten so bad that, for many Americans, we no longer have basic trust in anything said by our government or media. As cartoonist Scott Adams once put it, we have factions effectively watching different movies, seeing different versions of reality. This can't go on peacefully or happily. The cultural split, the collapse of trust, is too deep and angry. The solution I hear from the authorities so far is greater central control of the media so that dissidents can't be heard at all. Stalin would approve. Instead, I'd like people to start thinking seriously about how we might find a relatively good solution by legally and peacefully dividing the country. If you have a better idea than that, please make it well known because we're in need of one. That's all I have for today. I'm Chris Schnee, storyteller, and I've got a lot of books on sale on Amazon. This time I'll highlight 3 of the more obscure ones. 2041 Root Access is a side story to my Thousand Tales science fiction setting. It's about a high school student who is dealing with a game and just wants to have a good time, but finds that petty people are trying to control the narrative in a literal way. The Dream of Avier, in the middle, is a science fiction story about the far future where people tell themselves a story about the nature of their identity, and they hide certain stories from themselves about things they've done in the past, while encountering people who have their own stories. Striking Flags is part of a pseudo-series with 2 other books that have striking in the title. It is about a society in which the narratives that make up people's moral system and religion and political system have collapsed, and people are trying to control the narrative of what will come next. Go check those out on Amazon. I'll provide links. I have plenty of other books out there too, some of them better known. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.